teachers, I imagine serving on an assessment committee like this, or assessment blueprint piece, would be wonderful professional development. Do they get professional growth points for that? Oh,
Yes,
good.
they do.
I wanted to make sure. So you're volunteering?
No, well, I was actually sitting here thinking like,
Ooh, I
and I'm
wanna
not
do that.
volunteering on everybody, but I would love to again, like this summer. And honestly, it is a good experience for everybody to get to do, but I've done the sensitivity and bias.
Yes.
And I've done the content, and I'm a nerdy teacher, you know, whatever, but it's really, really interesting to see the process, and you know, we keep complimenting, but kudos to Michelle and her crew, because it is an amazing experience. But you get your, you know, you get your credits and stuff, and you get lunch, and when, you know, that doesn't happen very often in teaching, and so it really is.
And if it's in the summer, we
No,
pay
you
an
get
honorarium.
time for
so-
lunch.
Yeah, you get time to eat lunch. But no, I would volunteer. I mean, I don't know if we're allowed to or not again, but I just think I wish every teacher could experience it, because then you really understand the process of it all.
Because, you know, so now we're going to get right into transition, because we're getting ready to do just that, okay? So Michelle is ready to call, in fact, it's imperative that the department continue on its path for transition, because we have to call those educators together here in May. We have to start this process. Because we have to have the questions developed. We have had to wait until after standards were adopted. We have less than 12 months to be sure that we've got our college and career ready assessment questions the way we want them, to put as part of our I-STEP work next year with our children. And it's important we begin that process. And so, Michelle, if you could talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
Sure.
And what we have planned, I would greatly appreciate it. And I was asking Troy here on the break, because prior to my arrival, there was not a plan in place for high school transition, because there wasn't a vision of putting a growth component of any kind. And so now we have a recommendation from the accountability to kind of talk about a growth component and what that might look like in terms of perhaps not an end of course assessment, but an actual proficiency kind of thing in math. Okay.
I just want to make a quick comment, not
Sure.
to interrupt the flow, because I do want to talk about transition, but you were talking about the blueprint panels.
Yes.
And I agree with everything, and that's where my comment is, so I want to
Okay,
get it in
go
before we
ahead,
left
go
it.
ahead, go ahead.
But one of the things that I observed in the CCR panels, I would really encourage is that in addition to pulling those teachers in, is get higher ed back involved again. And for two reasons, and this was just two things that hit me as I was watching the CCR panels. In the same way it's richly informational for the teachers, it was fascinating listening to the conversation between the higher ed folks and our K-12 folks. And it worked well for the standards.
It did.
I would not
very
want to
well.
lose that going into the assessment, especially as we're thinking about college readiness, and we're also thinking too about how those teachers are going back, or excuse me, those professors are going back to higher ed and using that experience to say, now that we know, because we've been involved in the blueprint work, we also know how to inform at the university level some things in terms of.
In fact, you've touched on something that I was going to bring up later, that I think I'll just bring up now. I really would feel that it would benefit us to have at the table, when we begin this RFP, the RFI and the RFP process, representatives from 3 groups. I'd like to have 2 people from higher ed, and have Teresa Lubbers appoint a couple people. I would like to have the governor and I to each appoint somebody from the round table to have kind of a liaison kind of piece. And then I'd also like for the 2 co-chairs of the accountability to have a couple people here to really get everybody's point of view when we start this process, so that we have some alignment as we're going between one group and the next group. And the higher education, that was so valuable with our standards review, to see that progression backwards that we really hadn't engaged in before. So I'm going to be speaking with the governor, and if that's okay with you, I think that would greatly benefit our subcommittee work here and start to inform our process. So transition, tell us what we have planned and what that looks like.
So, because we want teachers to obviously help us establish what the item specifications and limits and a blueprint would be for these items that are added onto iStep, right back here. So actually, in about 3 weeks, we want to bring them in and talk with us about identifying those particular pieces. My staff has already been, unbeknownst to members that worked on the standards, but I've been asking my staff to identify teachers and other educators that can contribute to this process, because we want to make sure that the folks we utilize are very well steeped in the new standards. That's just absolutely critical, that when we identify some items to add to the iStep test, that we actually involve teachers and educators who worked on our new standards, so that they're very, very familiar with those. So what we're going to be doing over the course of a 2-week period is working with a group of educators to, again, for the items that will be added to the iStep piece. And we can always add additional parameters, specs, limits, whatever, to what we do in 15-16. This, again, back to Superintendent Fritz's question, is about our transition. And so then we would fully expect to have a content review in July, so that we could actually get these items onto the form that we would need for spring 15 for iStep. So, I mean, we can keep you apprised of that process. I'm sure you would want to maybe visit, even if you're here in town in July. We would hope that you would come to the content review. I think you would
Will
really.
that be 2 separate groups of teachers?
We would actually do you mean for math and English?
No, I meant.
Yes.
Yes.
The answer
Yes.
is yes.
So-
And in a second group of people,
Right,
a
the second
completely
group is-
different group.
And it can be made up of some of the same,
people.
Yeah.
because we want some continuity, kind of like we had done when we
Right.
scaffolded the
The standard.
participation within the standards groups. And so we actually will be looking for teachers, and we want to do that before school's out, which is why we wanted to talk with you about it today.
Go ahead, Brad.
Again, ask a question clear to make sure I'm understanding, because I like this, what I'm hearing now better than what I heard last month. I want to make sure I'm hearing the right thing. The questions they're going to be selecting in May would actually be included as a part of the iStep.
Yes.
That's where we're going to put that transition, because we know
Right.
we have to give iStep. We don't have
Right.
a choice. We have to give it.
Correct.
So we're a couple of days. So we're not talking about bumping something to September or anything like that, right? So this is-
No, we're talking about the March and the May iStep administrations, and having some items that obviously are accountability, and
Right.
these other items,
Totally get that.
right,
So,
would
so,
be no stakes.
so that, since you brought up what we were talking about at the last meeting was Core Link,
Right.
we have every opportunity, if we want, to actually just let it be out there.
Yeah,
for educators to
build
just
like an
access.
experience college and career readiness. I don't know if any of you have looked at our experience online testing out there, where any parent, student, community member can go out right now and experience what online testing is like. What I'd like to do is build one of those for college and career ready items, so that any community member, again, any parent, student could actually go out and experience those items. It would just be, that we could post on the web. Kind of to BJ's question from the board meeting last month or earlier this month, I forget
Yeah,
when it was
working
now.
in the same
ninth,
vein of
the ninth.
identifying, 10 questions each to be able to put out there and just have them out there.
Because I think exposure to the general public is gonna be really important, for parents to start understanding what this looks like, as well as for educators.
I think I like that idea a lot better, using it as a resource. I think the only concern I would have would be is just making sure that we don't have questions that may not be directly aligned to the new standards, or. that
Oh,
we
they-
assume
yeah,
they'll
they-
be-
if they're not
will be
aligned, they
aligned.
wouldn't be
Or
on.
that we assume that they are, because that's the thing you
Yeah.
get into, is then you start teaching to a thought about what the test is
Yeah.
going to be,
Right.
instead of teaching
Yeah.
to the standard.
Yes.
And even at that, it'll be hard to control it as we go forward, but I think as we look at the blueprint panels, that will be something that's going to have to be constant.
And I think, Dr. Oliver, what you've identified is something that we work very, very hard to ensure, and that is that anything that we push out is aligned.
Right.
And that's just a critical piece, so I appreciate the comment.
So why don't you go ahead and talk about our process for college and career transition? And is there any more you need to say about that? We're getting ready to get the teachers together. Kind of went through the process a little bit
Right,
already.
I did. And so, I think if you think about the flow chart, we're gonna be starting the flow chart, in a few weeks. And, kind of working a fast track to get some items on iStep that can give them exposure and access to college and career ready content.
And
Um,
Indiana will own those items, correct?
We actually won't own those items, but they will only be aligned to our standards.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So now we want to include, so Troy and I were having a conversation, that we want to be sure that we're including in that
the high school.
somehow, yes, high school, so that they can get a flavor for what that's going to be later coming up.
And would you find that valuable, Troy? That's something that the superintendent and I have been discussing and thinking about what we wanted to do with that.
Yeah, I think anything that we have is, like, to add, one of the missing links is the growth model being
Mhm.
able to continue.
Mhm.
That's gonna be a difficult piece if we continue with the same ECA plan that we have now, that is very subject
Right,
related, unless we can tie in and transition in over the next couple of years, and I don't know how that can be done, but
Mhm. I think, one of our concerns was making sure that these high school students also had access to college and career-ready content based on the standards we just adopted today, and technology-enhanced
And
items.
could they be included in the algebra and English 10 test?
I don't know, it's a different vendor,
efficiently?
so I don't know if we can add it to the test, but we could make, I think, an experience for
'Cause-
them or an opportunity for them.
Because I think if we could add it to that portion, I think that it would be an easy transition.
Yeah, within math and within English
Mhm.
during the same
I think we
timeframe.
can certainly try to. And if it's not possible, I think we still want to give them an opportunity. I was concerned that high school kids wouldn't actually be
But I think that
looking
they
at
could
those.
experience that because, of the variety
Mhm.
that goes across. And of course, I would just include those retesters as well, as they're gonna get that experience as well.
Yeah, since eventually, hopefully, they're going to go to
good
college or a
point.
career.
I
Good
mean,
point,
they're always,
good
they're
point.
right
Right.
into that,
Sure.
so I don't think that would be an issue. And I think it could be added to the biology very easily.
Yeah, we'll go back and look at testing times and things like that and see what we think we might be able to do.
Yep.
But we definitely wanted to pick your brain today to
Yep.
know.
I think that that would help with the accountability piece that was mentioned previously in the presentation. But it also would give kids exposure.
Right.
And hopefully, through that process, we can still eliminate some of the need for remediation with House
Right.
Bill 1005.
Right.
Touche.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for your input. RFI, so you have a draft, and I don't know if, I think perhaps people may just have questions. You guys have a presentation on it, or?
We
I
just
mean,
wanted to, I think, open it up.
I think I want assurance that it's broad enough to include anything we might want to include. So, or ask of vendors and,
Sure.
and have their presentations on, so.
Well, we were purposefully very broad in the way that we drafted the RFI, and what you'll notice is we even tried to provide potential respondents with a lay of the current landscape and what is required under either federal or state law. And we were specific to state that vendors, respondents could be addressing only one portion of it. So if they only want to do grades 3 through 8, or if they want to do, as I mentioned earlier, if they want to do something that's grades 9 through 11, but not address the potential need for remediation, or if they want to roll that in terms of what we do now with AccuPlacer, if they think they would be able to substitute that need with a different, absorb that with one assessment rather than having 2 separate assessments. It really leaves it open so that potential vendors can come to you with their RFI and say, we have an assessment that could do X, Y, and Z, and then it would allow you to make policy decisions. It lets you know the lay of the landscape in terms of options, and then you can make policy decisions knowing what those options are. I do want to highlight that there is a placeholder there for growth language, as you see. One of our consultants said that he would provide some specific growth language that would ensure that information we receive in response to the RFI would allow us to have the information necessary to analyze whether growth calculated by an assessment would be reliable and valid. So he anticipates having that language to me either tonight or early tomorrow morning. He had a lot of different things on his plate, and I will just cut and paste that language into the RFI as you see it.
Excuse me. I think what we're hoping to gain is, you know, examples of solutions. I mean, I think that's what this committee really needs, is examples that you can refer to see which of these, if any, seem viable moving forward and so on. And then talking, when we get to our procurement timeline, talking through having some of them come in and actually present. One of the things that we understand we need to work through DOA, so we did think that we would finish it this week and get it out the door and hope that they would post it by Monday, a week from today, so. But do you have any questions or
Any
concerns
suggestions?
or suggestions for us?
No, thank you very much for preparing it, because I know nothing about preparing an RFI. But it appeared to be very broad, so that we could have
By design,
good
yeah.
conversation with each of the vendors. Okay, if you could take out your timeline for procurement. A couple of dates that we need to actually nail down right on here. And that would be June 11 and June 12. Because those are the dates that we are suggesting for actual presentations from vendors as a result of the RFI. Does anybody have any,
So not the May 15th.
do you have this? Do you have more copies
We
of this?
pass them around, but we have more.
Did we have it in there? There it is.
Yeah.
was
I have
holding
two,
the
the 15th and 16th, I got a sub.
Of May?
Yes. special
Yes, that was originally
That
proposed.
was our original idea.
It was.
Now what we're wanting in
Here.
terms of sequence,
guys
we
have
want
this?
to
Do you
get
have
those
one?
RFI responses back for you to look at them before we would have any.
We wanted to give us a chance to look at them
presentations.
before we ever had the presentations.
That works fine. Graduation is.
Works
The
fine for
8th.
you,
Is it
huh?
the 8th? Okay. Does either day work for you? Is one day preferable? I think Michelle and I were hoping to kind of get some feedback from you today about those
I
two dates.
I have some things on the 11th, but they can
You
be
do?
rearranged.
Okay.
I have a
Right.
quick question.
Can I
Don't
say
worry about
something about that?
Oh, can Dan make a comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Is it, with the resource guide and the assessment issue, is it preferable to have a roundtable meeting before June 15th?
Well, we have to.
Right. The governor's office was considering, I just found out half an hour ago, June 11th. If
For the
that
roundtable.
matters. That's the only reason I raised it.
They were, huh?
They asked me to ask you that.
Well,
and
And that's a Wednesday. The 12th is a Thursday, so maybe
Well,
the
let
12th.
me put this out to you, though. I think we have an even earlier meeting for the board.
Mhm.
So the board meeting in June then would come before the roundtable meeting, which I'm not sure. I guess we don't really need an approval process back and forth, but the roundtable just wanted to see them, see the resources. So I guess we probably would be okay holding, if he held the meeting in the morning, perhaps. And then we might need more than a day, I guess is what we're talking about, because we don't know how many vendors we might want to actually
Right.
invite in.
I think part of it is, do you want to see the RFIs and then establish the list based on what you receive? Who would you like to hear more from? Again, it's more information gathering, as Michelle's already described. Both the RFI process and the presentations are to gather information that would really help inform the RFP. So one option is for, once we get these RFI responses back on June 5th, we identify who it is that you want to actually hear from on the 11th or the 12th, for example. But I forgot to go back to you. Sorry, Brad. I know you
I
had a
just have a
question.
critical question about the timeline, about a step that's not on here, and that is,
Okay.
since the last meeting, I've had a chance to talk to some of the teachers. I know Carrie has talked to some of the teachers in her building. And it seems like there is a desire, and if I were them, I would want this too, that there would be some kind of spring pilot of the test that becomes the high stakes accountability test in 2016. So that being said, this timeline pushes out a little bit from the one we had last month, not by much, but a little bit. And I'm okay with that, because I still think they can hit that, but I just want to make sure, since I don't see a step on here for spring pilot, is that an unresolved discussion we need to have to figure that out, or are we all on the same page on that? Because I'm
Yeah,
hoping that if
I think we probably want to see what solutions folks offer also, and then have you take a look at those and see, you know, do they offer that they want to use the fall test as a pilot and they want to do that to measure growth in the fall of 15? And so, I mean, yeah, fall of 15. I mean, I think we're wanting to see what they bring to us in terms of options before we would decide if we would actually give a pilot in the spring of 15.
So I wanna clarify where I think you might be, Brad. So we just talked through transition,
Yeah,
and it's a long process, and we're starting it in May.
and it's tied to the ISTEP, which that makes sense to me, I think that's a good move.
And we can use that information.
Right, I understand that. I think the larger concern I have is if I'm a sitting teacher right now, and I know that next year ISTEP's still gonna count for my effectiveness rating and for compensation increases, things of that nature, I think they get that. But I think they would welcome doing a pilot run-through of what we're moving to, assuming, and I'm making an assumption, assuming that we would have a proficiency exam given towards the end of the year, a year ahead of us giving it in 2016. So I don't see it as a step on here, and I understand what you're saying, we're not assuming that yet because we haven't had the RFIs. I'm just saying I would love us to leave open that possibility, because even though it wouldn't count, I think most of your teachers are gonna say they're gonna welcome seeing it before it hits them for real, because it will count in the spring of 2016. I mean, whatever we use is going to start kicking in that year. And I think most teachers would say, at least having some knowledge of what's coming will make them feel more confident going into the 15-16 school year. It's just a suggestion. I know I've heard it from a number of teachers who are saying, we will get a chance to pilot something first, right?
Yeah, do you think they see that different from what we're already doing in our transition? Because we'll be setting cut scores on these items that are added to ISTEP.
I just think it's the whole proctoring of the exam. It's everything that goes into it. And we don't know if we're staying with CTB McGraw-Hill. We could be staying with CTB McGraw-Hill. I think it's safe to assume there'll be some things that'll be similar. But I just think it's the idea of this means a lot to them. So when we get to that, before you get to 2016, it's the first time they're seeing it. I think one of the ways you address that anxiety is if we work with the vendors to say, we want to run through, we want to pilot it. Maybe it's a scaled down version of it, but it's at least give them a sense of this is what's coming. I just want to put that out there because I would be asking that question in the RFI sessions. I would ask them, if we were to award if you bid on an RFP and we were to award you an agreement by the end of October, could you be in a position, what's the earliest you could do a pilot? I'd want to hear that from them because I think the teachers are expecting that they're going to get a chance to see something before it's high stakes. That's all I'm trying to put on the table. Does that make sense what I'm saying to you?
I think so. We were just over here talking about trying to be really broad and not too narrow in the RFI itself, but in the RFP.
I don't think we
would
have to write
be-
an RFI. I just want to make sure on
Okay.
the timeline we're all on the same page because I wasn't sure we were, or maybe we're not, and maybe we don't have to be at this point. But I know I personally at the RFI meeting I'm going to be asking that question because I want to know: do you have the capacity to kick it into high gear in October to give our teachers a chance to see what may be coming in a pilot? Because it would help I think it would help our technology directors. I think it would help a whole lot of people to have a run through before it's high stakes and it's the sole test in 15, 16. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think ahead.
I think it would be interesting to see what they say. If they say they can have something in spring 15 or they would offer it in fall 15 or, yeah. I think it'll, I guess I don't know what they're going to say, obviously.
Because I just want to echo, you know, if it's the first time, and I know the standards will be the standards, and the transition test we talked about will be the standards, but the platform of a test can be so different, and even the wording of questions can be so different. And if we're accountable for it in 2016, it would be nice to see it.
Now, the wording
Before
of
the
questions, just to kind of revisit that again, is decided by Indiana
Yeah,
educators.
we do
So
that,
we
no
would-
matter
we
who
would
the
be doing
vendor
that.
I
is.
just, you know, it's just, there's still lots of, I mean, there's just lots of differences in test platforms and stuff out there. And
Mhm.
so, you know, if there's no dress rehearsal, that final production is, you know, is even more nerve-wracking.
I mean, I think what we want to send the message definitely is that we need a dress rehearsal, no matter when it is, we want one, right? And then when could they offer it, I think is what I'm hearing.
It is, but I'm going to push gently back on that and say I think I can make a case that it's even more imperative to try and get it in next spring because when you start thinking about A to F and you want to start running some analysis through how A to F is going to work and do some you got to have some data and it's got to work somewhat consistently with how the big test is going to work in 2016. And I don't know if that could be done if you did a fall administration. My thinking is that you press on the vendors to say this is high stakes for them. If they want the bid, they better be able to produce a full-scale pilot in the spring so we can see some of this stuff, because that's where we're at, and I suspect they'll move heaven and earth to make it happen. But again, it goes back to the test design to get that. I don't wanna just leave here and assume that it's just gonna be a fall pilot in 2015, and then we go immediately into the spring test. Something on that, I think we'd survey teachers would say, I don't feel real comfortable about that, but we'll see. Something about.
So let me clarify something. Because I'm trying to wrap my head around how we would get all of that done with kids next spring. So we have to begin now in getting our transition questions ready. And then you're kind of speaking about if we had another vendor, then there'd be another pilot. How are we gonna fit that in with?
At this point, I just wanna ask the question.
Okay.
Because I honestly think it would be very challenging if we say we're going straight from iStep to the new test. Because I'm not thinking of just teachers, I'm thinking of technology directors, I'm thinking of platform issues, I'm thinking without some kind of dress rehearsal or pilot. You mentioned the fall, I get that, and that may be where it's at. I think spring gives them the advantage of seeing some things in a live environment, and then have the summer even from the technology side of it to work on some things. I'm just throwing it out there. I just want to ask the question right now. That's all.
We'll go back, I think Michelle and I are thinking, we'll go back and look and see if we've said anything about it, or make sure we've kind of alluded to, we wanna know.
To make sure that the responses to the RFI will provide information about how they would intend to pilot.
How
roll
they
that
would
out.
transition to theirs.
So if that's okay.
Or
we'll
perhaps
make
work
that
with us in the transition.
We'll make that
I just think, we
additional.
need to ask, what's their plan for the dress rehearsal?
Right.
I mean,
So just to make sure, we're hearing, that would be fine if we make that additional edit to the RFI.
Yeah, that's
consistent
what,
with
that's what we're
this.
hearing. Was there anything else that you wanted to make suggestions for the document itself?
The only thing, this is another comment suggestion, and again, I'll leave it to you guys to think this one, but again, I think consultation with the field is going to be critically important, and I don't know if the RFI has been run by, like, say, a small group of technology directors or IASP or anybody in the field, but I think I asked some questions the other night, and Danielle or somebody was great to give me some feedback on who was involved with the RFI, and it was appropriately so, people from the different state agencies. But what I was also looking for was there anybody from the field taking a look at it, because sometimes they think differently in the field than we think when we're looking at it from the SEA side of it. And I just, watching traffic last week with technology directors, it might be good to see, because they may say in the RFI, you should be asking this about things that we're not going to think about, because I don't think like a technology director. But I'm going to ask that person, tell me what you think. To just leave that to you guys, that you may want to shoot that RFI, get some feedback before it goes out the door.
All right.
We've got some
Future subcommittee dates. I know we have a board meeting coming up on the 14th. Do you want to just meet after it? And just kind of let it be that, kind of let that be our format here for now? Okay, that sounds good to you. Let's do that. The RFI, well, let me ask you this question. Maybe I should ask Michelle and everybody. Will there, what would you think our agenda would be if we have a meeting before we get the RFI back? Or, maybe I should have asked you when would be appropriate to have another meeting so that we will have some information.
Well, I think there were some questions today about other aspects of assessment. I mean, we could have
Okay.
a really brief meeting
Okay,
if you wanted to after.
and see where we are in the
Mhm.
process and
Mhm.
what's happening and.
Do an update.
Because we
and
have more to talk
we can
about.
talk
and
about
there's plenty to
open-ended
talk
versus
about.
multiple. I mean, some of the questions that came up today, we can
Okay.
have a brief conversation if you'd like.
All right, okay, let's just do that then. All right, anything else to bring before us today? All right, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you so much.
Can you fill me in here?
all right, so,
This education committee.
I gotta cancel myself for the 15th and 16th, but I had to get
this is